Everybody teaches you a business should grow and it should look like that. It's actually okay if you have a relative amount of success fast. It's okay just to go like that for a while and consolidate on it and make life really easy for yourself in some respects. It's that balance of, earning a decent income, having fulfillment from the work which you do, and also the freedom. But the thing is, what I've learned through that as well is in that journey of scaling, capacity was the thing which really came to the forefront. So you can grow your capacity through having other people. You can grow your capacity through having better systems and processes within your business.
All right, welcome back to the Better Human podcast. As usual, we've got amazing guests. Robin, how you doing, brother?
I'm excellent. Really looking forward to our chat. Well, it's
as am I, and I'm sure the audience is as well.
Absolutely.
All right. So for the audience, we are here with Robin Waite. Robin is a coach that very much helps consultants and freelancers scale their business, define sort of their service offerings, develop the confidence to go out there, right? I was actually chatting about this earlier, which is like, what do we need to do outreach from a sales standpoint with a couple clients? And, it's always an interesting conversation. People are uncomfortable with this stuff. They sometimes don't know what to do. And usually in my experience, you see freelancers and these consultants, there's an expertise there. They just don't know how to always communicate it. So I was chatting with you earlier, and I had a client literally ask me this yesterday, right? Where I was in a coaching session, and the topic of consulting came up. They said, hey, I'm doing some consulting, and what advice or what tips or suggestions do you have for me to be successful as a consultant? And I said to her, well, I'm actually meeting Robin tomorrow, so I'm going to use that exact same question to kick off the episode. So Robin, let's start with that, man. Like, in consultants and freelancers, it's a pretty broad question, but what might be some tips or thoughts or guidance you would give people becoming consultants, being successful at consulting or freelancing?
Yeah, great question. So I'm glad we've opened with that, because it's very close to my heart, because I spent 12 years as a consultant myself doing sort of marketing and things like that before I started coaching. But exactly like you said, most consultants and freelancers are really smart people, really generous, humble human beings, and quite often they're quite introverted. They get amazing results for their clients. Yet they're still charging by the hour, charging by the day, because that's how they see that business is done in the consulting and freelancing space. And when you can see that there's a big shift when you kind of move from doing hourly rates into then selling packages, because that's the ultimate. If you can get into selling packages as opposed to by the hour, all of a sudden your value isn't driven by time and materials that you put into a project. It's delivered, it's derived by the value which you're then delivering for your clients. And that's the difference in the conversation. It's just a lot of consultants and freelancers, when they first start out, it feels like the spotlight shining on them, and they're, and it's all about them. And when you get them to come out of themselves a little bit and push themselves to one side, and I use the word ego here actually, but I don't mean it in like a negative way. Ego is just how you view yourself basically, and how you show up in the world. If you push yourself to one side and move your ego out of the way, and remember that you're dealing with clients here who actually both of you have got each other's best interests at heart. Your clients want a great return on their investment working with you as a consultant or a freelancer, but equally they also want you to get paid well as well for it, because if there's a quid pro quo here, if it's a win-win, you're going to be working with that person for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years into the future. What you don't want is if a consultant or freelancer is underpaid, typically what starts to happen is resentment starts to build up in that relationship, and that's no good for anybody. Results suffer with the client. The supplier, the consultant or freelancer just loses the will to live and eventually gives up. I've seen that so many times.
Yeah.
So the faster you can realize your value, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that whole pricing side of things. So, there is that saying, like, you got to be careful about trading time for money, because it's a consistent, never ending loop, right? You're stuck in that cycle. And being able to sell packages really talks to things like, here's the outcome we're sort of going after. And, here's how I'm going to go about, creating this outcome for you. And I totally agree. Why? It's a bad question, but why do so many consultants and freelancers have such a hard time around that pricing thing. Like,
Mm.
something really registered with me, which is if they're not charging the right amounts, they're going to get demotivated. They're going to be stressed out. They're not going to be able to perform. It's going to actually affect the entire expertise in the delivery, right?
Yeah.
How does someone go about knowing whether they are, here's the better question. How does someone go about knowing how to price themselves accordingly to what their services are?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to come at that slightly different angle because there's a couple of things around hourly rates, which once you understand them, you'll realize that hourly rates just don't serve anybody in the slightest. So the first one is when I speak to a lot of sort of consultants, they have modest goals that they want to achieve, financial goals themselves. So maybe they want to get to, I don't know, 10K a month, $10,000 a month for income, right? But when you actually start doing consulting work, it's not like you've got 160 hours worth of client fulfillment to deliver and you can charge $50 an hour and all of a sudden you're at 10K. Most consultants only work probably like 1, 2, or 3 days like of client fulfillment a week max. So the moment you're charging like hourly rates at $50 an hour, your earnings capacity is limited. You can't reach 10K because you're not working enough hours. So they have to find creative ways to sell more hours and maybe try and hire too soon, but they haven't got the bandwidth to pay them. So that's the first clue that hourly rates don't really work. It limits your earnings capacity. The second example, which I always use when around hourly rates is, let's say, for example, you're in the market for a web designer. Okay, so you're going to get a website built and website designer A comes along and you agree that it's going to take maybe 20 hours to build and it's $50 an hour. So this website is going to cost you $1,000, right? So fair and reasonable for a website, you think. But what they forgot to tell you was that they've only been doing it a short period of time. They're not very experienced. They're not up with all the latest tech. And so it comes back, it's kind of like half-assed. It's not quite fully as you'd expect it. There's no blog on there. There's no shopping cart. And you're like, well, hang on, this isn't what I expected from my web designer. And they say, well, it's fine, but you've used up all of your hours. So you're now going to have to pay for another 10 hours to get me to finish this. So resentment builds up. You're like, well, okay. And reluctantly they agree. We've all been there, right? And we know that story.
Right.
But then you've got web designer B who comes along, right? Who has been experienced. They've been doing it a long time, up with the tech. And they've learned how to do it more efficiently and faster. But what they don't know what Greg and Robin know about pricing. So they're still also only charging $50 an hour for this. But they do it in 10 hours, not 20. So they only get paid $500. And it's like, hang on a second. So the guy who's more experienced and does a better job and gets better results gets paid half what the other guy gets paid to do it, right? Mm. So there's our second clue. That hourly rates really is like it's a flawed transaction model for service client businesses. And this is now an answer to your question. So how do you start to sort of flip that on its head? Well, imagine website designer C saunters into the saloon, with the website ninja, website cowboy, right, or whatever, cowgirl. And she's been doing it for years. She's the best in the industry. And she stands there and says, right, if you want a website, Greg, I'm going to build it in 72 hours. Within the first 30 days, it will be producing 20 really highly qualified leads for your business. If it can't do that, what I'll do is I'll give you a refund for all of the money you've invested in my website, and I'll pay you $1,000 for wasting your time. So you can go and give it to those other two cowboys over there, right? Now, which one of those three web designers do you want to choose?
C, 1,000%.
C,
right? Instantly.
I haven't even told you how much yet.
Yeah.
Right.
That's actually interesting that you said that. You're right. You haven't even said the price yet, and I'm already like, okay, great. Let's do this. Right. So then, what is that price that you're about to drop?
So let's say it was 10K. So it's 10 times the price of the other two.
Yeah.
But it comes with those guarantees. Now, what web designer C, the website ninja, she's focused on results for the clients. So now we've both got skin in the game. And if she can't get results, well, the client doesn't have to pay. And this scares a lot of consultants and freelancers,
That was going to be my next sort of comment or question, which is the guaranteed success or return or the refund policy, that must really freak people out. And, so talk us through that.
Well, for one, you don't have to put a guarantee on there. If you're not comfortable doing it for whatever reason, But there's two words which normally crop up when I challenge somebody to say, hey, what's your guarantee? Could you put a guarantee on this? The two words they always say, and they're swear words at Fearless HQ, by the way. Those two words are, it depends. Okay. So what they're saying is, well, it depends on whether the client keeps up their end of the bargain. It depends on what their product is. It depends on there's too many variables in that business if the words it depends come up. And your job as a business owner is to remove as many of those it depends as possible, as many of those variables, so that you can start to create systems and processes so that things are repeatable. So that if you imagine you work with similar sorts of clients on every project that you work on, and you only do a specific type of, project for that specific type of client, you're going to get much more predictable results. And when things are predictable, you can then start to wrap guarantees around it, because it's like the contract. If I do A, B, and C, and you do X, Y, and Z, this is the result we're going to get from this. Now, there is a caveat to the sort of the money back guarantee as well, with things which you can measure. So websites, for example, you can measure search engine optimization, analytics, leads, all the rest, marketing qualified leads, or you can measure all of that sort of stuff. So that reduces some of that, unpredictability within things. There are industries, however, where you're not allowed to offer it's unethical to offer guarantees. So I'm thinking here, like a therapist, for example. A therapist cannot guarantee that helps reduce somebody's mental health, right? It would be unethical, immoral to offer a guarantee in that situation. Yeah. But there is a solution. There is another option for that. So I call it the perceived value guarantee. One, you can still measure it, but it's led by you as the client, for example. So if somebody were to come into a therapy practice, maybe their confidence was low and they're coming in just to have some therapy to help with their confidence. You say, day 0 on a scale of 0 to 10, where is your confidence at the moment? They might say a 2 out of 10. Okay, great. So if we work together for 12 weeks and we could get your confidence up to a 6, 7, or an 8, would that be a good result for you? And they might say, yeah, that would be great. I could walk into a room confidently and have a conversation with somebody. Fantastic. Okay, let's work towards that. So we can measure it. The second thing is it's also about the perceived value to that client. So what this sounds like is I might say something like, okay, Greg, so how about we do this? If we get to the end of the 12 weeks and you genuinely feel you haven't received value for money, we'll discuss a refund at that point. And the thing is, as if you've worked with somebody for 12 weeks and you've got to know them at a deeper level, everything that and things are predictable because you've removed the variables, you qualified that person, you've dialed the needle so far in terms of both of your, towards that win-win, and you've built the trust up over those 12 weeks, it's highly unlikely that person's going to ask for a refund unless something really catastrophic has happened.
Correct. It's very rare. We used to do that early days of the business where, with our training program, it was, the people that were a little hesitant or unsure, that was part of the line, or the response, which was like, look, let's jump into this. If by week 4, because it was literally a 12-week program, if by week 4, you're like, look, I've given this a shot. I tried it. I checked it out. I came to the restaurant. I tried some of the food. I'm really not into it. No harm, no foul. Let's sort of pull out. And at that point, we could refund you for, wasn't the entire amount, but it was like, we'll refund you less this admin fee, this, and this, and this. And, 9.9 times out of 10, someone by that week, you did the check-in and it's like, so how's it going? It's like, no, I'm really glad I ended up in this and I'm going to see it out and stick it out. Very, very rarely there was someone that actually would go through it and at the end would say, nope, didn't get anything out of it, ate the entire plates, right? Licked it clean, had dessert, had a glass of wine, but no, I didn't like it. And at that point, you know what? It was just a bad client, or it was just a bad sort of relationship. No harm, no foul. Let's not ruin the 99% focus for the 1% that we ended up sort of having a bad interaction or result with.
You've said something so important there, Greg. So I'm really glad you used the words bad client, because a lot of people feel really guilty about saying something like that about clients. There is some truth in that. There are bad clients out there. Yeah. And occasionally I think, So the reason a lot of bad clients happen is because business owners don't take responsibility to qualify people before they come in. And again, they're putting themselves first. They're too focused on putting food on their table and paying their own mortgage. They take on clients they perhaps shouldn't have done. And I think it's great when you're experienced and you've got a good pipeline, but it's really hard to discern the good clients from the bad clients when you're first starting out.
Right.
So I think it's really important to kind of, and labor that point when you're starting out. Don't just go chasing the dollars. Slow the process down, because like it's quite even though you kind of okay, put your hands up, didn't quite work out, I didn't quite qualify, got to hand them. It still grates a little bit. It still hurts when things like that happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, it still happens to me today. I'm 30 plus years in the business. And I will have this meeting internally, which is, let's say there's a new client or a new opportunity, and we start to sense that like this is going to be a difficult client, and we know that because they start to request we change the way we do things, right? So for the consultants and freelancers out there, for me at least, that's the sort of the indicator to be like, okay. And early days, you'd be like, sure, we'll do that. No problem. Because you're so hungry for the money in the business and cash flow so tight that you're scrambling to take everything. And those clients will cost, well, you won't make money on. They'll end up costing you money. It will take up a majority of your time. So you'll end up losing focus on some of these other clients. And it all begins with disrupting your process. So, one of the things I've learned is, we know what we do, and we have our program, we have our process, we have the way we do things. And yes, everything is adjustable and customizable. But if it's now taking us away from the way we do things, and for us, it was a very specific example, which is, can you take that entire program and put it into a 3-hour session for us? In early days, like, sure, we could do that, right? But no, you can't.
We have a really simple model which we created. So this only came about. So I didn't necessarily target accountants in my marketing, but I'm an absolute enthusiast when it comes to numbers. I'm a big fan of Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, and I ended up just working. I spoke at a couple of accounting-based conferences, and I picked up some accounting clients, and it kind of snowballed from there, despite my lack of effort to market to them. But I ended up having to create this. It's like an Anzoff matrix, but for accountants. When I first started working with them, because the same conversations kept coming up, and it was like, when you 80-20 an accounting practice business, typically about 20% of the clients take up 80% of the accountant's time, right? And it's actually not just accountants. This is probably similar in many different industries. And so we came up with this thing called the PITAF chart, which we would do with the clients. You know what PITAF stands for? Pain in the arse factor, right? So on the bottom matrix, you would have on the bottom axis, you would have the PITAF score on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being a massive pain in the arse. And then on the vertical axis, you would then plot how much money each one of those clients was coming in. And whether they had 10 clients or 1,000 clients, each accountant would have to go and plot every single one of their clients onto this chart. And what you'd end up with is this subset of clients down in one corner that are a massive pain in the arse and not really paying that much money, i.e. they're just taking up loads of time and resources in that practice and eroding profitability. And so you kind of got a couple, and then the opposite to that, you've then got clients who are like really easy to work with, get great results, and they're also paying a lot of money and are happy to pay that. And then there's a few clients who kind of sit in between that. But the mistake a lot of business owners make is they just want to tear off the sticky plaster and move clients, immediately from that bottom square there up into that top quadrant up there. And you just can't do that. There's no way you can do it, because there's actually two things at play here. One is client expectations, which you've got to manage. And the second thing then is pricing. They're two separate conversations to have with those clients, and you can't mix the two up, because all of a sudden what happens is when you have that conversation, what the client hears is, I'm a massive pain in the ass and I'm not paying you enough money. And it's a really awkward conversation. So we realized that some clients we just had to offload, and that's okay. And we'll call them bad clients. They're just not good for that business. That's all it is. Offload them. And then we had a choice. We would either first manage their expectations and then reprice them, or we would reprice them, and which some would leave anyway, which is a bit of natural attrition, which was always good for business as well. Then we would manage their expectations. And so in a two-way sort of chess move, you would end up creating practice with these really amazing clients, and it was almost like a breath of fresh air, especially in the bigger practices where they had a number of staff and then the accountants working in them. Like, you'd go in there 3 months later and they're happy happy employees, and it's just because they're having a better relationship working with those clients.
You just told me your story was exactly what happened with me and my accountant, but I'll tell that in a sec. But before we go there, my question is, so how would you advise someone to go have that conversation? So let's say it is the client that you want to increase the prices of. You're going to keep them. How do we go have that conversation with them where it doesn't sound like, oh, you're a pain in the ass, I need to charge you more money?
Yeah. So the pricing one's easier to rationalize, and because there's a lot happened. I don't want to do an economics like 101 here, but there's a lot happened obviously over the last 3 or 4 years worldwide, globally, with the whole inflation at the moment being plus 10%. It used to be that most businesses, who came up with this rule, Greg? Who came up with the rule that once a year we'd reprice our clients and we put our prices up maybe by 10% if we were feeling really brave, and we couldn't reprice our clients any other time in the year? What a dumb rule, right?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, we throw out the rule that we can only reprice our clients once a year. We throw out the rule that, because like 10% in this day and age, you're standing still. You're not making any more money if you put your prices up by 10%.
Right.
So thankfully, what that means is, like, the media have done a really great job on behalf of small businesses of saying, well, everything's getting more expensive. So you've just got to go in and have that hard conversation. And when you do, make the price rise big enough that there's a bit of jeopardy in it. Because it means that, one, you've got skin in the game. So if you're putting your prices up by 30, 40, 50%, we had a client put their price up 2.5 times.
Wow.
In one price move. They hadn't done it for several years. So there was a bit of a backstory.
There's a bit of a conversation that they had to have.
Yeah, exactly. But they just had to have those difficult conversations. The biggest mistake people make when they're adjusting their prices is they'll send out like a carpet email to everybody, and that is the biggest no-no, because who's going to respond to that email? Yeah. Of course, it's going to be the people who are unhappy with the price rise. You never get somebody who writes back and says, "Oh, thanks so much for putting my prices up. I'm really pleased you've made that decision." Yeah. So the best thing you can do is deal with each person as a human being in their own right, with respect. Sit them down, have the conversation with them, and just say, "Listen, we're going through a price adjustment at the moment. What this means is that, we're going to be putting your prices up by," you don't necessarily have to do percentage terms. It's actually easier if you use dollar terms. So if they're paying $500 a month for something, listen, we're repricing you. You've gone up to our silver package and it's $750 a month now.
I love what you just said there. So it becomes like a conversation around, hey, we're doing this work. Scope has now increased. We're now going to move you up to the sort of next package, which includes all of X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
and then some. Yeah.
That's it. So it's a little bit kind of, and you kind of want that to be genuine. I never tell people to put their prices up without stacking some extra value. It's always got to be about value. Price is what you pay, but value is what you get. But if there's some like really high perceived activities, things that you can do in terms of value that don't take up too much of an extra overhead, time or expense or whatever, that client's going to significantly benefit from, then they'll see some wins out of that. It's like a win-win situation, and things do change. Businesses, if you're a growing business, you could end up being repriced into different packages like 2 or 3 times a year as the business grows.
Yeah. My bookkeeper came to me last year and she said, "Listen, Greg, a little bit of fall in the sword. I hate to do this, but one of the things I got to do is I got to increase my hourly rate. You're my only client that hasn't gone on a price increase. I'm actually getting this rate for everyone else, and this is what I want to charge you. I'm, same amount of work, same quality of work. It's just the amount of work it's intense, and this is the rate I'm charging, and I want to be fair with you, and I want to increase a little bit." And it was very much like, "Are you good with this? How do you feel about this? Can you see the reasons why I need to ask for this?" And me as the business owner, I was like, "Makes sense. Sure, no problem." Now, the risk of losing her was way worse, right? So, but to your point, it wasn't just I want to increase prices for the sake of increasing. My costs have gone up. This has gone up. These are the rates that I'm charging. And my other story was my accountant last year who came to me and said, "Listen, Greg, I I gotta kick you out. I gotta punch you. I gotta fire you. And I'm like, what do you mean? Right? His name is Jonah, which I'm going to call after this and be like, Jonah, I was talking about you on a podcast today. And he was like, look, I love you, but I'm a small shop and you've grown and you need more of a cross-border accounting service. You need someone that can help manage the US, someone that can manage Canada and international. And I'm battling to do this. And I've been trying to sort of keep up with it for a while, but my firm does this and my type of client is this. And you've just grown out of my scope. Right. And as much as I was like, that sucks. And now I got to go find a new accountant. I get it. It makes a lot of sense. Like he knows who he's servicing and how he's servicing them. And I had to take my hat off to him and be like, I respect that. Totally respect it.
Yeah,
So,
I hear you. I think the way that he's handled that is fantastic, and that's a business owner that's very confident in his abilities to deliver great results to a specific type of business owner, which is funny enough. I've still got my accountant. He hasn't fired me yet, but I always have like we always have a bit of a game. So we get to my financial year end and it's like, right, it goes midnight and I hand him, my books are done on zero, right, immediately, because I love numbers, just an absolute nerd. Right. And then he knows that the clock is ticking because I love to get it, like all my returns done in the first 30 days, pay my taxes, done. I don't, like most people wait for like 10 months, which is our limit here in the UK, and before they pay their taxes. I'm like, no, I want HMRC, our tax company, like here's my money. Pay me some interest on it, please, but just have it. And I don't have to worry about it for 9 months then. Anyway, he the way he positions his questions sometimes and the way he talks to me always makes me feel like he might fire me. but then it makes me really needy. I really want to make sure that I'm like, cool, I've got everything sorted. Here's the books all clean and tidy. Like whatever I work for him. Not the other way around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's important what you just described there, which is like you need to manage your clients in order to be successful within your process.
Definitely. But this is also why like pricing is so important, and that attachment to the sale that we talked about. If it's driven by ego because we've got to put food on our own table, like that's not helpful to anybody. But if you're willing as a service provider, coach, consultant, freelancer, whatever, if your clients can see that you're willing to walk away because it's better for you, that builds so much trust in the relationship, and it makes the clients work harder to make that relationship work as well. Like there is nothing worse than a client relationship where it feels like as a service provider, you're the one who has to jump through the hoops and do everything, and you were literally a servant to that business owner. They just delegate responsibility to you. And then lo and behold, what happens when things go wrong? Well, the finger gets pointed at you because who else is there? Whereas actually, if you're as a client, if you're that little bit needy to make it work, it's going to work both ways. For sure. I talk a lot about the 50-50 relationship. In fact, you'll like this and feel free to use it, which is as a freelancer consultant, you got to show up and do your 50%, and the client needs to show up and do their 50%. Together we have 100. And there might be days as the freelancer or the consultant, you got to push it up to the 60, the 70, maybe even the 80. But it is about the balance of the relationship that will create the success in your delivery and in the result that the client is looking for. Definitely, and hey, if you push it up to 70 and then the client brings, some gold to that as well. Well, 70 plus 70 now is 140. So
correct. And we might find it swings, right? Where like the client starts to push up 70 and you start to sort of, swing down to 30. It's like kind of a marriage sometimes, right? Mm. So just, I got a couple more questions on this. So as a freelancer consultant, usually they're individual, like a sole proprietor. How do you recommend from a scaling standpoint that they go from being an individual sole proprietor to now starting to onboard some team?
Yeah, so there's a natural progression. So we have something called VAT threshold here in the UK, which is when you hit about 85,000 in revenue, pounds in revenue, so about $100,000 in revenue, you have to start paying and putting VAT onto your value-added tax onto your invoices, right? Most businesses, when they hit VAT threshold, are actually, they should be typically about the equivalent to a 1.5 person business. Right. So round about VAT threshold, I'm normally having conversations with clients about onboarding their first either part-time or full-time equivalent, hire in their business, whatever that looks like. It could be made up of a number of freelancers, but they're doing between them 20, 30, 40 hours a week. Or they've got enough work in a specific sort of, as a freelancer, for example, who's just solidly building websites. Maybe actually now is the time to bring in a web developer or a web designer to take on a bulk load of the work. A business then that kind of beyond that then grows to around about the 240 to 300K mark. So again, that's pounds. So if we, around about $300,000, say, they will typically be a 4-person business. So that's owner, manager, and then 4 people plus or minus 1.
Okay.
That's like the lifestyle business at that point. They're probably pushing good profit, net profits off that, probably maybe 80 to 100K, for example, net profit. So really good margins. Everybody's having fun. It's a small, agile business. We get some really cool clients who we want to work with. But there's something which happens when that business takes on like the 7th person. All of a sudden, it just goes to, can I swear?
You could totally swear. It goes to shit.
It goes to shit. Yeah. I never know. I do a lot of podcasts and sometimes people are a bit funny. I should have checked with you, Greg, before.
Yeah, no. It's in my bio. Like, be careful of the F words and the swearing because it's going to come out of it.
So 6 people, no problem. That's all fine. 7th person comes along, all goes to shit. Right. So,
So why? So tell me why. Yeah.
Well, it was down to, it's actually down to the armed services figured it out. So they worked out that the maximum capacity human being has to manage other people is 6. They can cope with managing 6 people. 7th person comes along and your focus is diluted and attention and ability to give that, deliver that many instructions to all of those people and solve all of the problems that comes with it. So what do you do at that point? You can either choose to stay in that nice, fun, happy space of, lifestyle type business. The next leap actually happens round about the $1.2 million mark, where you've got probably 10 to 12 employees within that business. And, you've now got three teams of 4 teams of 3. They've got specific functions, whether it be admin or sales or marketing or, they're all working in their little units. And if you think about it, that's like 3 or 4 little lifestyle size businesses all come together to have one big party, at $1 million a year. Right.
Right.
And these trends actually carry on upwards as you go. So the moment you end up with like I think it's the next dip is actually like 18 people because now you're back to 3 teams of 6, or 6 teams of 3, and 3 people is quite hard to build a functional team around 3 people, right? And there was a really great consulting coaching company here in the UK. They were originally based in Australia called Sherlaw's Coaching, and they mapped this model out to over $1 billion a year revenue. It just followed this trend of these leaps and these dips all the way up in terms of like the numbers of employees. Little agile teams is a really nice way to kind of think about it. But yeah, starting out and hiring your first person is really quite scary to a lot of small business owners. So going way back to the start, Ken. Right. Their biggest fear is that one person who they hire can't do the job as well as they can. And it just stifles everything because now they're like this here. They put on their cape when they come to work and want to do everything. And I have a theory about this, which is that you and I, Greg, we definitely fit into this category. I hope we do. And people listening to this might think that Robin guy's a bit of an idiot. What's he about to say now? Right? We fit into this category of entrepreneur, and there's millions of people just like us out there who are brilliant at what we do. Right? We operate at 150% all the time. So average Joe comes along who's actually really good, operating at 100%, is delivering really great output anyway. So, we just have to allow for that extra like 50% of wiggle room there to say, well, let's give them time. Let's train them up. Let's, how long have you said you've been doing this for 30 years, Greg? You can't expect somebody just to walk in and know what and be able to do what you do with the skill that you do it at, because you practiced it for 30 years, right? So it's just about being a little bit lenient and recognizing, like most of the small stuff, I used to really sweat the small stuff, even down to, so I sold my agency, started coaching. I built websites for 12 years, right, Greg? And I'm there trying to get my coaching practice off the ground, and doing tons of stuff, and came to the website and I was fiddling with the website and finessing it and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing, Robin? You're not a web designer anymore. You're a business coach. Like, nobody else is going to notice all of that. So long as it looks professional, it's got a nice headshot and people can navigate. That's good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Right. But the control factor, right, of it all, it needs to be. I literally had this conversation before we got on the podcast. I was meeting with my mastermind, and the topic was change today. So to really sort of why and where and how do we go through change, not the corporate sort of nonsense of ADKAR, but, really as human beings, why is it so difficult for us to change? And what is it like changing behavior, et cetera, et cetera? And I said, one of the things I've really had to learn to change about myself as the business leader and the owner is I got to back off on the control factor, whether it be sales or marketing or facilitation. If I'm not careful, I end up doing all of those jobs and my business isn't going to grow. Right. And I love what you said, which was like, as soon as you hit that seventh person, it just, the dynamic changes and your ability to lead and coach those six is very different. You get your focus gets diluted. And I'm thinking about some of my corporate clients where I'm like, how many people are on your team? They're like, I got 47 people on my team. And the first thing I think is, where do you get the time to manage 47 people? And obviously there's layers in that. There's another saying about business, which is if you could be in business for a year, you've got a good idea. Once you've been in business for a year, your next milestone is to stay in business for 3 years. If you're in business for 3 years, your idea's turned into a nice business, right? Not sustainable because it's probably really much built off your back, right? It's you doing, right? That entrepreneur. The next milestone, right, is we want to hit year 7. If you could hit 7 years in business, you've got a business. You've got processes, you've got operations, you've got your product or your service, you got your team, you got your rhythm, you're managing cash flow. Like it's systematic, right? And then if you can hit year 15, you've now made it. Your business will sustain. And like restaurants, majority of restaurants close in year 1. Like freelancers or consultants, most give up within a certain period of time. But it's about sticking it through and pushing it through. And I love what you've just described here, which is around the growth of people and hopefully what I've done with the growth and the time of your business. Like there's a lot of exercise in staying the course and in some cases getting out of your own way, right? Which I think is probably the hardest for a freelancer or a consultant versus call it the traditional entrepreneur that's going to create a product and they're going to go build a marketing business and they're going to build a team to sell it. It's the freelancer, the consultant, which is like you're the SME, you're the expert. It's you, you're the web developer, right? So
yeah,
cool.
I've got an insight on this, and because I've been through those growth phases, those scaling phases, and I'm going to stick with the coaching practice. Actually, it's more recent, more relevant. So there's this whole big movement in the coaching consulting space about being a 7-figure scaling coach, yada, yada. And I think I won't go too deep into this because I could easily this could turn into a rant, Greg, as opposed to actually being useful. There's a lot of smoke and BS in that.
Correct.
And I got kind of caught. I'm not going to lie. I got a bit caught up with it in the early years of my coaching practice. I've got a really successful practice. I've done 6 figures every year in the 8 years I've run the practice, but that was based on those 12 years of experience in my previous business. Kind of felt a bit easy and effortless in that respect. But things went well in the first few years. I thought, right, it's time to scale. Started scaling, bringing team members in, doing all sorts of stuff like that. And I was just sat there, just like almost like, in a corner rocking because I just didn't enjoy it, didn't like it. It felt like there was, I'll be very honest here, too much responsibility. Every day I had to show up and just tell these people like what they needed to be doing. Whilst there was some autonomy there for them to do as they please, but it just, I have a young family, Greg. Like, I'm not going to lie. My girls are 9 and 7.
Yeah.
And I realized that just to keep the wheels on, I was having to work ridiculous hours, and it was just taking me away from what was most important to me. And actually, everybody teaches you a business should grow and it should look like that. It's actually okay if you have a relative amount of success fast. It's okay just to go like that for a while and consolidate on it and make life really easy for yourself in some respects. It's that balance of, earning a decent income, having fulfillment from the work which you do, and also the freedom. But the thing is, what I've learned through that as well is in that journey of scaling, capacity was the thing which really came to the forefront. So you can grow your capacity through having other people. You can grow your capacity through having better systems and processes within your business. But one thing which really stood out to me, and actually this is linked to pricing. You look at a business that's doing 100K, what they're doing as a 100K business is never going to get them to a million. It's a completely different business when you get to 1 million, not because of strategy or structure or things like that, but it's purely down to capacity in the product or service that you sell.
Correct.
you know, I had at a very basic level. So one of the first clients I worked with as a coach was another web design company. And Rich was doing WordPress websites with care plans off the back of it. And his one goal, similar to me, was just to have a bit of freedom so that over the summer holidays, he didn't work for 6 weeks so that he could spend it with his kids, right? And we started to do the maths. We looked at his care plans, which were £8 a month. And he needed to get to about 3,000 a month in order to be able to give up work over those 6 weeks, not take on a new client project. And I was like, cool. So you can cope with 400 clients. And it was literally like the international sign of distress went out. Oh, I couldn't possibly cope with that many. I was like, okay, well, what could you do about it then? Oh, I could hire some people to do it. And I was like, yeah, but you'd need 4 of you to make the maths work. Right. That's not going to work. So what do we do? So we increased the price of his care plans from £8 a month to 50 as a minimum sort of entry level, stack some value, like I was talking about earlier on. And then all of a sudden now he needs a quarter of the clients to reach his the same goal. Right. And it's the same with like growing between a 100K and a million as a coach or consultant or freelancer. You cannot, if you're selling $1,000, widgets at 100K, well, you've got to sell 100 a year. If you go to a million, now all of a sudden you've got to sell 10,000 of those things a year, or 1,000, sorry, of those a year. Correct. And most people they just can't deal with it. They can't do the maths on it. So it's like, no, actually what you need to do is now here's where it gets really interesting, and I know we're kind of coming towards the end of it, so this is quite a good thing to wrap up on, I think, or aim to wrap up on. So imagine we've got our product suite. We've got 3 products. They're $1,000, $5,000, and $10,000. Okay. Now as a small business, we rarely sell those 10,000 because of our confidence or because of our market or just what the product is. Whatever reason, there's limits there. But we know that we need to sell more of those 10K products to get to 1 million if that's how we're going to scale. And it's a really simple decision. It's a really simple equation. All we do out of those 3 products is we ditch the 1K products. That's no longer available. Like your accountant, sorry, right. Not for you anymore.
Not what I'm focusing on, right. Yeah.
So we ditch that one. We still got those 2. We've got the 5K and the 10K. But now what we do is we introduce a super expensive Platinum Plus, all singing, all dancing 25K or 50K package. So all we've done, like similar sort of process delivery, business model doesn't necessarily change or anything like that. Everything works the same. It's just we've repriced our packages, stacked a load of value, but we've immediately increased our first order value, our customer lifetime value, and all of the metrics which then come after it, just with one simple pricing decision.
I'm smirking for the audience. I'm smiling here as I'm listening to Robin talk, because I mean, it's amazing at how, as business folks, freelancers, consultants, sole proprietors, entrepreneurs, how we get in our own way and we cannot separate the forest from the trees. And you get so stuck on like, I've always sold this $1,000 product. We gotta sell more of them, versus, wait a minute, maybe we've evolved to a stage where we could drop that and really focus on these 2 offers, which are really where we've evolved and we've matured to in the business offering. And I agree with you. I also have a 7 and a 9-year-old at home. And the last couple of years for me, specifically the last year, I was not happy in the business. I made all these hiring decisions where like I stacked up the team, and it wasn't, first of all, it didn't actually end up netting the result that we wanted. Right. But, it wasn't the same. And, we sort of pulled back from that, and we've created a new strategic plan, which one of them happens to be with a very strong partnership. And it's very exciting because, this partner can come in and fulfill a very specific role and responsibility. And I could have a partnered relationship with them, right? Where we've got some mutual aligned goals and objectives, and there's like shared revenue. And we're both working towards it by relying on that expertise instead of trying to manage it myself. So I get it. Totally get it. So a couple things, by the way, for the audience. Robin is wearing this cool T-shirt that says Fearless, and he's got this amazing neon light thing behind him in his studio that also says Fearless. What does this represent?
Well, hey, Greg, look, if you stood still for long enough, Greg, I'd probably get my Fearless rubber stamp out and stamp you as well, just because you just be careful, okay? So Fearless goes everywhere, right? So Fearless came from, I was delivering a talk actually, and for the first 2 years, I was just Robin Waite business coach. I was delivering this talk, and I said something. Somebody said, well, how do businesses become successful? How do they achieve their goals and dreams and whatever? And I said, Well, business owners, like you say, business owners get in their own way, but it's driven by fear. Business owners could fear the things in business ever so slightly less that stop them from achieving their goals, they could go like miles. Right. I had a really good friend in the audience, right? And there was like 80 people. He literally stood up in the middle of my talk and he went, Robin Waite, the fearless business coach. And it's literally just, on the plains of Africa, you could walk 10 miles to get your water every day, and you could get eaten by hippos and crocodiles and things like that, right? There's genuine things to be afraid of. Right. In business, there's only two things that could go wrong, really. You could lose a bit of money, or you could lose a bit of face. And neither of them, both can be mitigated, and neither are that bad. And most people are so busy that a week later, they'll have forgotten about your mess up anyway, and they'll have moved on. If we can confidently be more fearless, walk into a room and do a 60-second pitch, if we can confidently, rather than hide behind proposals, when somebody says how much, we say it costs X. And that's it. We're just really confident and not afraid to have those conversations, not fear rejection. We can get much closer towards our goals much, much faster.
Cool. I love your story on how that came up, which was with someone else. Our brand, Making Humans Better Humans, similar story, right? One of our trainers came in and had t-shirts made for the holiday party that said Making Humans Better Humans. We're like, what is this? And she's like, this is what we do every day. I'm like, wow, you've just answered something for us, which is key. It's amazing at how it takes someone else sometimes to shout it out for us to go, oh my God, this is what I'm representing and this is what I'm putting on a t-shirt. Love it, Robin. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, for the audience, how can they get in touch with you? How can they learn more about you? Your latest book is also out. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so take your shot. I've got a gift for everybody actually who's listening. So I love to send out signed copies to all four corners of the globe. Gives me a little bit of joy every time I go down and see Pauline at the post office and hand one of those over. So so your listeners can get one of those at fearless.biz/TYS for Take Your Shot. It's a story about one of my first coaching clients. There's a bit about goal setting, being fearless in their pricing, packaging up your offer and things like that. It's like 5 really simple business principles that I've wrapped up into a 100-page sort of story about Russ, the golf pro who I worked with all those many years ago when I first started out. So yeah, a little gift. And also LinkedIn is a good way to connect with me and drop me a message as well. If you've got questions to ask to follow up from this interview too.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I connected with you on Instagram. I still got to connect with you on LinkedIn, which I'll do right after the episode. To the audience, we're going to have all of those links in the show notes. So don't worry about it. Just go to the show notes, click it, get a copy of Robin's book. What a gift. It's always amazing when you're able to share knowledge. And by the way, this is not his first book. This is book number 5 for you. 6?
Well, 7 if you include the Spanish translation. Take Your Shot as well. So let's not split hairs. Yeah,
correct. So, excuse me. Actually, it's 7 books, not 5. Right? As we said, we want to go from year 3 to year 7, like books. You want to go from 3 written books to 7 books.
Well, I have to rationalize this just very briefly because I would say I've got 2 proper books in Take Your Shot, an online business startup. 3 of them are then lead magnets, and the other 2 are translations. So yeah, it depends on like how you rationalize what constitutes a book, really.
Well, writing a book is an undertaking in itself. But for the audience, reach out, get a copy of his book. It's always good to do so. And amazing. And Robin, one other thing, I'm from South Africa. So when you said there's hippos and lions that are going to eat you, yes, that's the joke about South Africa is everything's trying to kill you. It doesn't matter whether it's a small bug, a lion, or someone else. And my family's British, so I connected with you being from UK as well.
South Africa is the one place in the world I don't send my books to as well. I hate nothing. I've got friends down there. Anything I've ever tried to post has never arrived, and it never gets returned. Correct. It just vanishes.
Correct. So you won't have to send my copy of the book to South Africa. We'll get you to send it to my Toronto office. So it should arrive there. And then I'm going to get your address after because we got a Making Better Humans hat and gift box for you just as appreciation for being here. The final question of the episode is the most important question, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
I think I know we've been talking a lot about pricing and things like that, which you could argue falls into that sort of capital. I believe that the best things in life are actually free, especially stuff that makes you feel good. Cool. Just giving people a little gift of kindness. Like I always say to people around me, like if something like bad happens, I'm like, it takes as much energy to be kind to somebody as it does to like have a bit of road rage at somebody or whatever it is. You know, if you actually just empathize and can put yourself in their shoes and see that maybe they're just having a really awful day, you start to sense that bit of sympathy. You'd feel bad about then shouting at them as well, right? So kindness is entirely free. There's an amazing guy, actually. He'd be great for your podcast, guy called Simon Squibb, and he set up this website called Help Bank. It's mostly for people who are sort of, he's trying to help people get out of a job and start up their own business. That's his sort of quest. But he has given away so much money to so many people to help them to start up their business. He is one of the most generous people that I know on this planet, you know, and most of all, just the inspirational message which he gives to help people to start to take those first steps, I think is worth like billions of pounds, you know, more than the money he actually gives away. And I think that gift of generosity, give without take, you know, is massively important, just to be kind to people.
I might add to what you said, which is it takes less energy to be kind than it does to be angry, like road rage.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah, it does.
That's awesome. Well, listen, you and I are going to connect afterwards. So if you want to do that introduction, I would love to meet him and have him on the episode. But Robin, you are a superstar, brother. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you on my behalf as well as the audience. It was really insightful today, and I think you dropped some amazing nuggets and gems of insight and info for a lot of the audience. So thank you for doing what you do.
Amazing. Thank you, Greg. It's been a pleasure.
All right. To the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Go and check out Robin Waite. We're going to have all the links in the show notes, but go and connect with him on LinkedIn. If you got questions, reach out to him. If you want a copy of his book, DM him, or, you know, go click that link that we're going to provide. The world needs more thought leaders like you, Robin. So I appreciate you. Thank you. All right. Ciao, everyone. We will see you next week.